Picture this. It's November 6th, 1972. The Kitaguni Express train is making a totally routine overnight run, cutting right through the mountains of Japan. But then, as it slides into the Hokuriku Tunnel, it enters a kind of darkness that, for some people, would never end. This is the story of a disaster where following the rules was the deadliest mistake you could make. So that night, deep inside that tunnel, a fire breaks out. And when it was all said and done, 30 people were dead, a terrible, tragic accident, you'd think. But when the official investigation started digging, they found this one horrifying detail, a mystery that completely changed how we think about railway safety. 0. Get this, not a single one of the 30 victims died from the fire itself. So if the flames didn't kill them, what did? Well, the answer is an invisible killer, a poison that was unleashed by one single, catastrophic, by-the-book decision. Okay, so to really understand what went wrong, we've got to go back to the beginning of that journey. The Kitaguni Express rolls into the Hokuriku Tunnel. Now, at almost 14 kilometers, this thing was the longest tunnel in all of Japan. It was a symbol of modern tech, a steel artery, just bypassing all those tricky mountain passes. For the 760 people on board, they had absolutely no reason to think this trip would be anything but totally ordinary. And this is where the story takes a turn. This is the heart of the tragedy. See, it wasn't caused by someone panicking or doing something reckless, just the opposite, actually. It was caused by the crew doing exactly what they were trained to do. This whole disaster, it all came down to a single rule in the official operations manual. So let me ask you this. Put yourself in their shoes. You're the conductor. You get a report, there's a fire on the train. You are deep inside a tunnel, miles from any exit. What does the rule book tell you to do? Your next move is going to decide the fate of every single person on board. And there it is. That's the catastrophic rule. The Japanese National Railways Manual was crystal clear. You see a fire, you stop the train immediately. Now, this rule makes sense if you're out in the open air, right? You stop the train, you contain the problem. But inside a tunnel, it was a death sentence. By stopping, they killed the airflow that the moving train was creating, that piston wind that could have pushed the smoke right out. Instead, they basically created a stationary, sealed container, and then just started filling it with poison. And from there, the situation just escalated with terrifying speed. At 1:10 a.m., the fire is reported. Just 3 minutes later, they make that fatal stop, trapping everyone 5.3 kilometers from any chance of safety. The crew, to their credit, they try to fight the fire, they call for help, but by 1:52 a.m., the fire burns through the power lines. And just like that, the entire tunnel goes pitch black. Absolute terrifying darkness. Every single action they took, even with the best intentions, just sealed that tomb a little bit tighter. But here's the thing. That flawed manual, it wasn't the only problem. It was really just the trigger. The Hokuriku disaster was a perfect storm. A whole bunch of pre-existing failures in design, materials, and planning that all lined up to create what you could only call an architecture of failure. So let's break this down. You can see how the failures just stack on top of each other. Operationally, you have the bad manual. Then, materially, the dining car where the fire started was built with all these highly flammable plastics and fabrics that just pumped out incredible amounts of toxic smoke. The tunnel's infrastructure was shockingly bad. No ventilation systems, no radio for communication, no way to get a rescue vehicle in if the power was out. And finally, the response itself was doomed from the start because the railway had been warned about these exact dangers by fire departments before, and they just ignored them. Okay, so we've talked about the technical stuff. Let's step away from that for a second and focus on the human cost. What was it actually like for those 760 people trapped inside that dark, smoke-filled tunnel? Well, for 13 agonizing hours, they were caught in an absolute nightmare. This was the silent killer, carbon monoxide. This stuff doesn't choke you like normal smoke. It's completely invisible, and it has no smell. It just silently replaces the oxygen in your blood. The victims would have felt confused, maybe a little dizzy, and then they would have just collapsed, never really understanding the threat that was taking them over. I mean, just imagine the sheer terror. First, it's that smell of burning plastic. Then the jolt of the emergency stop, and that chilling realization that you're not moving anymore. And then, at 1:52 a.m., the lights go out. Total, absolute blackness. Panic sets in. People tried to escape, to walk out along the tracks, but in the dark, with that thick smoke, it was impossible. They were totally disoriented. Many of them were actually forced to turn back. retreating into the very cars that were filling with poison. 13 hours. Just let that sink in for a second. 13 hours from the first report of a fire until the last survivor was confirmed to be out of that tunnel. That is an almost unimaginable amount of time to be trapped in the dark, breathing poison with no idea if help is even coming. But out of all this horror, a revolution happened. The deaths of those 30 people were not in vain. The Hokuriku Tunnel fire became this brutal but absolutely necessary wake-up call that completely rewrote the rules for railway safety, not just in Japan, but all around the world. The changes were immediate, and they were sweeping. First thing, that fatal rule was thrown out. The new protocol: if there's a fire, you get out of the tunnel no matter what. Second, new laws required that all train cars be built with strictly fire-retardant materials. Third, all long tunnels had to be upgraded with modern safety gear. We're talking smoke control, communications, the works. In fact, this tragedy directly influenced huge projects down the line. The famous Seikan Tunnel, for example, was built with its own dedicated parallel evacuation tunnel, a direct lesson learned from this disaster. And this, right here, is the key takeaway. Just look at the difference. It's night and day. Before 1972, the whole system was basically a house of cards, just waiting for a breeze. After 1972, a brand new, robust system of safety was built directly on the lessons from this fire. Pretty much every major safety standard you see in long tunnels today has its roots right here, in this tragedy. It was a painful transformation, but a powerful one. And that kind of leaves us with one final, sobering thought. The railway had been warned. They knew about the dangers. This tragedy is a stark reminder that safety protocols aren't just lines in a rulebook. They are written in the lessons of the past. The real challenge always is to learn those lessons before they have to be taught in fire and smoke.